Okay.
Okay, if you start.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Eleftheria Mfiadzi, Secretary of UECNA, and I'm here to introduce you to Dr. Jamie Banks, who holds a PhD in Social Policy Health Economics and earned master's degrees from Dartmouth Medical School and MIT. Jamie Banks is the founder of and president of Quiet Communities. She is a healthcare and environmental scientist with an extensive background in health outcomes and economics. During her career, she held senior consulting positions working with the healthcare industry. In 2007, she turned her attention to environmental health and climate change, first founding Planet Rewards, a company pioneering a corporate platform to promote eco-friendly behaviors, and then founding Quiet Communities in 2013 to help find solutions to problems of harmful noise and pollution affecting communities. He also chairs the Noise and Health Committee at the American Health Association, and she is leading efforts to develop policy statements around noise and related pollution. The first American Health Association policy statement, Noise as a Public Health Hazard, was published in 2021. Tonight, she will talk to us about the findings of recently published research. And dear Dr. Banks, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eleftheria, and thank you, John, for inviting me. And thank you all for attending. We have a small group, but that's okay. This is recorded as well. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. I'm going to talk to you today about a pilot study. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, it's very clear, Jamie.
Okay, good. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about Quiet Communities, just to tell you who we are, and then really go into the subject of today's meeting. And it's a pilot study called the Community Impacts of Aviation Noise. It's a survey that we put together. So Quiet Communities is a national nonprofit organization. As Eleftheria said, we were founded in 2013. We're 12 years old this year. We're largely a coalition of scientific, medical, and legal professionals concerned with all sources of noise, not just aviation. And you could see the broad areas of interest on the right. That's really areas that we deal in. We promote quiet as a valuable natural resource. It's something that is endangered, at least here in the States. I hope in other countries it's different, but I'm not sure. And we work with communities, policymakers, and others to reduce harmful noise and related pollution. As scientists, we take an evidence-based approach, but that's also solutions-driven and collaborative. We try and engage with different stakeholders. Our Quiet American Skies program is composed of a number of people from citizens groups and from Quiet Communities itself. So we get a lot of firsthand knowledge about what communities are experiencing in the States. And our work, we're not just scientists. Our work really sits at that juncture of community issues, science that we can bring to the problem and to the solutions, and developing policy implications. So this is the article that was published, Community Impacts of Aviation Noise, a pilot survey. It was published in the Journal of Exposure Science and Environmental Epidemiology early this year, and it was part of a special issue on noise, a public health problem, and it was an honor. I served as a co-editor along with the editor of the journal, and there are a number of very good articles in there, several related to aviation. So if you look up Journal of Exposure Science and Environmental Epidemiology, It's a little clumsy, but you can find the special issue. It's under collections and see the different articles that are in there. I want to say thanks and acknowledge contributions. My co-author, Becky Petru O'Rourke, Christine Peliquin, who did a lot of the statistical analysis, our Quiet American Skies program members, the ones who participated in the focus group in developing the survey, and then, of course, the people who participated in the survey. So why did we do this survey? This is information that you all know very, very well. Passenger traffic, as well as other forms of aviation, are all growing. Passenger traffic is supposed to double by 2040. We have conventional aircraft, cargo aircraft, business jets, and so forth. We also have emerging areas of aviation, drones, urban air mobility systems. So this is really getting to be more and more of an issue. We know that it's a public health problem, it's an environmental problem, it's a national problem, it's a global problem. This is from, I think it's called FlightAware or Flight Track. It looks like insects all over the United States. And you can imagine when this doubles, what it's going to look like. So we know in communities here, there are people experiencing really hundreds of flights going over their homes. And with the introduction of the Next Gen program, a lot of these flights are at low altitude. So it's become a dire problem for many communities. Our aviation policy really was formed decades ago. It's antiquated. It's based on the concept of annoyance. It's not quite clear what that means. It relies on this 65 DNL metric. It exceeds 65 DNL, exceeds safe levels. We know that. It doesn't account for peak noise. It doesn't account for flight volume. It's an average. It underweights low frequency contributions that we know characterize sound from all kinds of aircraft. And it ignores other characteristics apart from frequency that also may bear on how humans experience that sound. And importantly, it's not reflecting the lived experience of communities. So anecdotally, these are the sorts of reactions we hear from people who are affected by chronic aviation noise. If you think annoyance is sufficient, this suggests it's really not. And there's a lot to this issue and how people experience it, that if they have a survey and there's just one word, it may not reflect the kinds of emotions they're experiencing. So how did we do this? We developed the survey based on a literature review and focused really on review articles, because there's a vast literature now on noise and health and even on aviation and health, hundreds of articles. So we really focused on review articles. And then we developed a set of questions, had a focus group review them, did a couple of iterations, and this is called face validity. Does it make sense? Are the questions readable? But we didn't go beyond that to do formal psychometric testing. That takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. So again, this is a pilot study, kind of a first run out. There were 10 questions on the survey. The first 3 questions were it was an anonymous survey. People were not required to put in their name, any demographic information, except for a zip code. We asked about the type of aircraft exposure and the frequency of aircraft exposure. So what I mean about type was it commercial jets, military aircraft, or general aviation. It could be cargo jets, it could be helicopters, it could be small planes. And then the rest of the questions were really concerned with the impacts. Well, question 4, we got the exposure characteristics of the noise, and then the rest were how it's impacting people's lives and what their concerns were. We distributed the survey. It's an online survey. We notified 62 aviation impacted community groups that the survey was online. That was on May 15th. The survey was open for 2 weeks only. We closed it at the end of May. And people were encouraged to share it with others. So it wasn't necessarily just the members of the community groups, but maybe others that they sent the link out to as well. We analyzed the data in the aggregate. All the responses that came in, we analyzed, but then thankfully we had enough participants in various subgroups that we could do statistical analysis.
Jamie,
so the subgroups.
Jamie, sorry to interrupt. I'm going to mute everybody because there's some noises coming back. So that will include you. So you'll need to unmute yourself. If you unmute yourself.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Are we good?
We're good. We're good. It's just a little technical thing. Yeah.
Okay. So we did aggregate analysis of all responses, and then we did subgroup analyses based on flight frequency. How many flights a week were people affected by, and then the type of aircraft. Okay. So now for the results. Within 2 weeks, it was pretty shocking. We got 1,452 responses back. It was amazing. So there was a very rapid and large volume response. Geographically, in the states, there was a distribution: Midwest, Northeast, South, and West. And we compared this to the population in the United States, and it's imperfect because we don't know really where airports are concentrated, where flight paths are, but we just wanted to get a sense. So the Midwest and South were somewhat underrepresented. The West was overrepresented. In terms of aircraft type exposure, we defined this so that we could really select people who were primarily affected by commercial jets only, by military aircraft only, and then other general aviation without much commercial and military aircraft. So as you can see, we had, 100, 113 up to almost 300 people in each of those categories. It allowed us to do some statistical analysis on those subgroups. And then in terms of flight frequency, we had, all 1,452 and divided them into these categories where they were experiencing less than 100 flights a week, 100 to 500, 500 to 1,000, and over 1,000. So I'm just going to go through the data on 3 of the important questions and show you the results, because it's the patterns that we see in the results that were really striking. So this was question 4, and it's looking at descriptors of exposure to aircraft. And these are the choices here. And then, of course, there's something open-ended, but ones that we felt were very important. The responses that got the responses that got the most respondents were these here, that over half of the respondents said that loud noise penetrating inside their home, their office, etc., low altitude flights, nighttime noise, repetitive noise, unpredictable noise, and then constant or strong rumbling or vibration. Those were the top responses. We then looked at the subgroup to see how is that different from the general response. And what you can see here are pretty striking, almost linear responses. As the number of flights go up, you're seeing this increase in these exposure descriptors. And I'll warn you now, I have a lot of tables that look like this, but the point is to see the patterns. The numbers are going to be a little bit overwhelming, but I'll try and go through them the best I can. But it was so interesting to see these patterns consistently with flight frequency, and you'll see this in other questions as well. We did a statistical analysis to look at the significance of these patterns and the odds ratios. What are the odds of describing any one of these descriptors by flight frequency? So you can see that the ones in bold are statistically significant. There's only a couple here that are insignificant that are grayed out. And you can see this very striking odds that goes up with flight frequency for each of those responses, except for unpredictability. In terms of type of aircraft, these are how people describe noise from commercial jets, military aircraft, and general aviation. And you can see for general aviation, some of these are lower, especially for things like nighttime noise, only 55%. And it makes sense. You know, there's less general aviation traffic at night compared to commercial jets, military aircraft, possibly from what we've heard here. So these differences are very, very interesting and mainly very sensible when you think about it. Again, we looked at those results and did statistical analysis to see which of them were significant. As you can see here, most of them are. And you're getting this increase in the odds of selecting these descriptors, especially with military aircraft. This next question, how often does aviation noise interfere with your ability to do any of the activities that you see listed here on the left? And we have a scale from never interferes to constantly interferes. We assigned other labels in between. So next to constantly interferes was often interferes. And then we looked to see what percent of people were, concerned or very concerned with each of these areas of interference. And you can see here that these three generated the most response: being mindful, resting, relaxing, meditating, the ability to communicate, socialize, and enjoy activities, or just to simply enjoy being indoors or outdoors at one's own home. The statistical analysis here showed that the patterns you see as the number of weekly flights go up are all highly statistically significant. So the more flights you're experiencing, the more likely you're going to have serious interference with each of these activities. In terms of type of aircraft, the ones that are statistically significant are really based in a couple of cases in this difference you see with military aircraft interfering with the ability to communicate, socialize, and enjoy, with work productivity. And then you see here with general aviation, it's actually a difference, a decrease compared to these others that make it statistically significant. And again, that relates to, we think, to less probability of nighttime noise with general aviation aircraft. Question 7, what feelings best describe your response to aircraft noise? So here are some of those descriptors that you saw in that bubble diagram. The aggregate responses, frustration was the first 76%, a feeling of powerlessness. And that really, it often relates to, even if you close your doors and windows, you cannot get away from the noise. You try and call policymakers, they're either unresponsive, they can't do anything. All of these things contribute they all contribute to stress. Stress, anger, resentment. So all of these are above 50%. When we look at the patterns by flights per week, again, you're seeing these very striking linear patterns here. Fear not so much. But let's see. Yeah, but pretty much with all the rest. Most of these are statistically significant, with the exception of a couple. And then when we look at aircraft type, we see that military aircraft tends to be quite a bit higher than other kinds of aircraft in terms of these emotional responses or feelings. So in the case of military aircraft, you see odds ratios saying that the chances of picking any one of these is almost from 2 to over 3 times higher. With general aviation, you tend to have this pattern. This is all compared to commercial jets, by the way. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. Commercial jets in each of these cases was the reference category. So what did we learn from this? With something we already know, aviation impacted communities are experiencing mental and physical health impacts that extend beyond annoyance. These results are very consistent with previous surveys. This one happens to be more detailed, and the analysis by flight frequency and type of aircraft is unique. Exposure to loud, low altitude, repetitive aircraft noise, including nighttime noise, which we know is particularly dangerous, is common, intruding into homes and interrupting activities, communication, sleep, and the ability to relax and concentrate. And we know from some of the presentations here, certainly from the science and all the researchers involved, this has serious short and long-term health effects. Dr. Munzel last month explained a lot of the serious cardiovascular effects, the vulnerability of people with pre-existing disease, the dangers of nighttime noise. We saw strong and consistent exposure response patterns for flight frequency, meaning the more flights, the greater the likelihood of experiencing adverse events, adverse impacts, and then type of aircraft is an important determinant, especially for military aircraft. Now, people can tell when they hear aircraft, for the most part, is it a helicopter? Is it a commercial jet? Is it a military jet? Each of these aircraft have different acoustic profiles. And noise is not just decibels. It's frequency spectrum, it's pattern, it's duration, it's aspects called tonality, roughness, sharpness. There's a lot to acoustics that is missing from simply using the decibel metric as a measure of sound energy. In terms of implications for policy, this is such a tough problem. But there really is an urgent need to raise awareness of these health and environmental impacts, because just as it affects us, this is affecting ecosystems from aviation noise by educating the public, professionals, industry, including airlines, pilots, and other industry players. Particular concerns are the ones that we've reviewed here, the ability of low frequency aircraft noise to intrude into homes and schools, the importance of flight frequency as a determinant of stress and adverse impacts, mental and physical harms occurring in impacted communities due to chronic aircraft noise. This noise is not going away. It's going day in and day out, if not every day, then often several days out of the week, and people are not able to get away from it. Differences in noise profiles of different type of aircraft, just what I was explaining, and implications for health and environment. And then we know separately that there are people that are particularly vulnerable to mental and physical health effects, including people with pre-existing cardiac disease, people with neurological conditions, autism spectrum, people on the autism spectrum, and other disorders. So I cribbed this from Dr. Munzel's presentation last month, and I think it's a very good one to end with. The meaning of annoyance with respect to cardiovascular health, and I would say other types of health as well, has to be strongly upgraded. And thank you, Dr. Munzel in absentia. And thank you all for attending on behalf of Quiet Communities and our Quiet American Skies program. My information is there. For the article citation, I provided that to John. And so if you're interested in reading the full article, there's a lot more detail. The statistics that I presented here and even the numbers are simplified just for the purpose of readability, but all the details in the article.
Jamie, thanks so much for that. That was really that was fascinating, and I think particularly interesting for local communities who are affected and living under the flight path. Just to say to people, we will be putting all the details on our website, and of course, it's been recorded, so that will go on the website within the next few days. So much there, Jamie, and I think so much people will relate to. What came across to me was the link between, and this is what people say to us time and time again, the link between the noise and the number of flights. And people's concerns about the number of flights because, compared with 50 years ago, individual planes are quieter. We hear that a lot from people, but actually the sheer level of flights has increased dramatically. And also, what you said towards the end there about the link between aircraft noise and low frequency noise, which seems to be disturbing to people. So much there. And well, let's talk about the survey and what Jamie was saying. And then we might also talk about whether other communities could do a similar sort of survey. But let's start talking about what Jamie was saying. And the floor is open to people. And as I say every time, I'm a native English speaker, so is Jamie. But don't be afraid if you're not. If your English is a little bit hesitant, that's fine. You're amongst friends, and we'll help you out. So, who would like to say something? Just put up your hand, or if I don't see you, because a lot of people have joined the call, just start speaking if I don't see you. Any comments? Yes, Christian, you're going to have to unmute yourself because I'm afraid I had to mute you all during Jamie's talk because there's one or two noises off stage, as it were. So, but feel free to mute yourself and feel free to, if you want to show your faces and open up your cameras because it does make for a better discussion, I think. Christian, on you go.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Very insightful. I'm so glad to see low frequency noise in there. So I and chair of a residents association for community that is at risk of being demolished for the third runway at Heathrow. Having lived in the village for 50 years, it's obviously not something that I would like to see happen, but in the meantime, we are currently fighting easterly alternation, which is a precursor to some of the newer kind of direct flight capabilities, and we will see an increase in takeoffs that will go from 100 a year to about 160 a day under the proposed changes, and most of our properties are within 400 meters of the runway. So we don't really have any respite in that position. I'd be very interested and to perhaps follow up with you independently. I'd be very keen to use your framework and methodology potentially to gather similar insights from our residents, because I think the sorry, excuse me, the low frequency issues are a particular problem for us under the proposals. I think we're next to one of the busiest airports in the world, so it'd be interesting validation, perhaps outside of the US, to see if the metrics concur.
Christian, if you want to contact Jamie directly, just drop me an email and I can put you both in touch.
Thank you very much.
Martin.
Thank you, Jamie. That was really deeply impressing me. I'm more than 40 years engaged against noise, aircraft noise in Frankfurt, Germany. And it's the first time that somebody made a survey with the communities, with the people who are affected. I've never seen before a survey like this. That was a great idea to start this, to put the questions together. And the level that you did as well was fantastic, because you integrated all kind of noise, general aviation, military, and the commercial aviation. So that was really a fantastic idea to make such a survey, to use modern technology and to collect this data and put them together to see how people are annoyed. And we should repeat this survey and make the same in Europe or as well in a nation. And we could all use this as a good example, as a basis for our survey here in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, it is coming across, and we will touch on it towards the end. As I say, it is coming across, but I think many people would like to repeat the survey because there were a lot of heads nodding then when Martin was speaking. Okay, other comments? If not at the moment, let's move on to this idea of how you. I mean, you said a little bit of how you did the survey, but it could be replicated, either this survey or something similar, Jamie, couldn't it, if other people in other countries wanted to do it?
Yeah, I think, there were a couple of additional questions we would have liked to have added, in retrospect. One that was suggested was to have a question whether people have contacted their authorities and if they got any satisfaction by doing so, because
Yes.
it's been shown that either not having trust in authorities or authorities not being responsive increases, just exacerbates that stress and feeling of powerlessness and hopelessness, which is not great for our mental and physical health either.
No, it's absolutely right. The powerlessness point came across to me very, very strongly indeed, because I think, as you say, it's powerlessness, the feeling you can do nothing about it, that adds to the stress and almost the despair at times. And particularly if the airports are not talking to people, and some are better at it than others, but if airports are poor at it, people just feel they've got nowhere to turn.
Yeah. That was actually a suggestion from Arlene Bronzaft, who did a survey about 20, 25 years ago. Yeah, so when she saw this, she said, you really should put a question in about that. So I want to credit her with that.
No, but both you and she are absolutely right, because I think that is it comes across in all, as you'll know, in all aspects of noise. If people feel they're powerless to do something about it, they're more stressed out, and that can lead to real health problems. Um,
John, can I just mention one thing
yeah, sure.
in regard to what Christian was talking about? The low frequency aspect of these sounds is very, very important
Yes.
because it's that component of the sound that enables it to travel long distances and readily penetrate walls and windows in ways that a lot of higher frequency sounds do not. Um, so that, and unfortunately, the conventional metric, which is the A-weighted decibel, underweights that component. So you're not even really measuring the right thing or what should be a full representation of the acoustics here.
Uh, yeah, Christian, feel free to come back.
So, in terms of what should be, so if A weighted is incorrect, what should they be looking at in terms of the low frequency? Is there a different
C weight,
Yeah, there's C
C
weighting,
weighting. Yeah.
but so much of the connection between the sound and the effects are lost by just using a decibel metric.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we are. We're kind of stuck in that decibel world. And really, it's so many other things that contribute to the health effects. How long does it last? How many flights? Is it sharp? Is it coming through your walls and windows? Can you sleep? All of these things are so important.
Yeah. I've got another follow-up question, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Had you looked at, or are you planning in future to run similar surveys, and would you potentially augment those with either apps or other technology that would perhaps give you some kind of real-time insight or data? So just on a personal level, I've used a number of different technologies for monitoring noise at home, low cost ones, I should add. I've been a big fan of something that actually started in the US from Air Noise, who have a button, or it used to be an Amazon button. It's now just a generic button that will, obviously gather information about the flight and actually auto submit the report and things to the local authorities. But I'm interested to understand, is the next step perhaps actually getting raw data, whether that's C-weighted data, at the point that I press a button, and then potentially use an app to rate how annoyed I am, because I believe from the last session that was kindly run by John, there's a much greater level of angst when there is sleep disturbance. So if you're awoken by a late flight, either arrival or departure, that tends to have a much greater effect on hypertension and all of those things.
Yeah. It's not something that we do. We're really, healthcare scientists. Can we do things with the survey? Absolutely. We're limited, in some ways by bandwidth. We don't really have funding here for noise research, but that's not to say there may not be ideas out there for collaborating and raising some funds to do something, at least in regards to the survey, which is kind of immediately what I can think of. But I think the tools you're talking about would be wonderful, and perhaps it is some of the more tech-oriented companies that would be very interested in helping with that.
Yeah.
And just to follow, before I bring Martin back in, just to follow that up, University College London have done stuff some years ago along the lines you were talking, Christian. They worked with HACAN at Heathrow, So again, drop me an email and I can put you in touch with the right people, because it it doesn't replace, but it supplements the sort of surveys that Jamie has done. Martin.
Yes, Jamie, are there any recommendations from your side for us if we repeat the survey, if we do the same or a similar survey, what we could do and integrate in our planning? Because I think really we should take this as a basis and work out a survey for Europe or for nations in Europe, people who are annoyed there. And then we have something to compare as well with your figures. So if we do the same questions, it's the best, because then you have science like to compare one with the other. But maybe you have some suggestions where you say it's better to have one or two questions more, so we could learn from you.
Yeah, no, we could definitely consider that, Martin. Having another paper come out that has added survey results internationally, I think would be very, very interesting.
And it would be powerful, because I suspect it would come out with very similar findings to what you found, Jamie. The number of flights, the powerlessness, the low frequency, and that would simply add pressure to the authorities to deal with that.
Yeah.
So yes, let's liaise on this. On your go.
Yeah. So one thing I just want to say is that you need to identify, in this case, identify your audience.
Yes.
Our audience was aviation impacted communities, and we sent it. I don't know how widely distributed it is, but getting 1,450 responses in 2 weeks was wonderful. So, whether you have a mail list of other community groups. Here, I know Darlene is on the call here. Darlene works with all these different groups. They're identified. We have the email contacts and so forth. So that's kind of some of the groundwork that needs to be done before, you send out the survey into the ether.
No, that's absolutely right, because that's one reason why your survey works so well, because you identified the community impacted groups. Absolutely right. Bob.
Yes, I have a remark and a question. The remark is, how does the situation in the US with the new administration affect this kind of work? That's the remark, a question. And in addition, I'd like to know, because what I see from the presentation, which I like very much, is that the numbers, the frequencies of flights have a large bearing on the outcome. And there's a tendency of concentrating flight paths all over the world, over certain communities. And I'd like to know what the feeling there is on this respect. In addition, I see all plans in different nations to expand airfields. So I think we're on the wrong track, actually.
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. We are not dependent on federal funding. We consider ourselves to be bipartisan or nonpartisan, and this is not a partisan problem. It's a question of our health and environmental quality, which should be of concern to everybody. So we are, we have a lot of volunteers. We have a little bit of funding that we work with. We have no plans. There is no federal funding. There never really was in the past several decades anyway. And, so we're just going to stick to our work. We think ultimately that, a change in policy, acceleration of quieter and cleaner aircraft, all of this is good for health. It's good for planet. It's good for business. So it's a little dreamy, but that's really the big picture. I don't know if it'll happen in our lifetimes, but that's the hope.
May I reflect on this?
Yeah, far away.
Well, I've done various analysis on the effect of numbers versus the peak values. If you decrease peak values by, say, 3 dBs, now under the same LDen or L night, you can increase the numbers by 100%. Are people aware of this effect? Because in actual fact, what you see is that the argument of quieter aircraft is just being used to extend the numbers. So we end up with situations of continuous noise of a slightly lower peak value.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. And of course, the argument that you hear over and over again is that, well, aircraft are quieter, there's fewer people affected by the 65 DNL, but it's those repetitive flights and it's the change in aviation policy that's bringing, like concentrated flight paths, the expansion of flight schools, placement of military aircraft bases near residential communities, and all of this. So yes, I get your point.
Mhm.
And just to add to it, what you were saying, Jamie, in response to Bob's point, a number of the airports in the UK, Bob, are beginning to use an additional metric, what they call the N metric.
Yes,
So
I know. No,
you probably know it.
no.
So just for others on the call who may not be so aware of it, so N65 would be the number of planes above 65 decibels which go over a community in a particular day. And your results, Jamie, reinforce what people are saying, that this is a much more meaningful metric than the averaging out. Now, I think the airports and the industry will stick with the averaging out, but certainly in the UK, what we're pressing for is for the N metric to be used in addition to the other metrics. And I think there is certainly some response from government and some of the airports to doing that, because it would be much, much more realistic. Because as I say again, what really came across from your presentation, Jamie, was that it's the number of flights which are the problem. And although they may be marginally quieter than they were 10 years ago, actually, when they're concentrated over communities, they don't feel any benefit at all.
No.
No, and it's, what I've said it so many times, but I don't know if I've said it to this group. It's the idea that if it were just decibels, a dripping faucet is not going to bother anybody. It's that constant, dripping, or the constant flights and the repetition. And there is some science, not enough, unfortunately, that show that there is a sensitization effect, meaning that, the first time, the second time you hear it, maybe it's not so bothersome, but you become very sensitized over time with repeated noise that you don't even have to hear the full loudness, if you will, of the noise. You're already, revved up, in anticipation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I know by experience, because we experience
Yeah.
probably about 400 flights a day with peak values ranging from, say, 50 to 75 dB. But 400 a day.
And these are the kinds of things that really need to be studied more.
Yeah.
Yes.
The sensitization effect, the repeat flights. From a cardiovascular perspective, Dr. Bunzel and his colleagues have found that there's something called a priming effect, where once you are exposed, it sensitizes the blood vessels to even further damage upon repeat exposure. So you're seeing this happen physiologically.
That's really interesting. Right, we've got a hand up. I can't see you, but it's L. Hibbs.
Apologies. My name's Lee. I'm hearing
that's better. I can see you.
I'm hearing I should apologies. My computer might crash in a minute because of it's literally at the limit. I should stress here, I'm here in a personal capacity, not a professional capacity. John, just a quick thing on when you mentioned about and above. Just I think the important thing to lose, we're sort of pushing for that locally around Gatwick as well.
Yes.
I think the important thing to bear in mind there is just bear in mind that particularly of a night, if you do an N60, you know, when the plane gets to 59 decibels, the problem doesn't magically disappear, sort of thing. And certainly of a night time, I think something that people should be looking at is awakening contours, which basically, if you like, takes account of both the number and the noise. So you can have, you know, 100 flights at say 55 decibels, and that's equivalent to 2 flights at say 70 or 80 decibels, sort of thing. Don't quote me on those numbers, but that gives you the general principle of how they work. And I think particularly during the night, the awakening contour concept is quite a powerful way of doing things.
No, I absolutely agree. I think the M contour shouldn't be used in isolation because it can result in exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, just one thing more. There's been some discussion, a meeting that Darlene Yapley was running a lot of recently, a couple of months ago in Las Vegas. There was a lot of discussion about N above ambient, meaning what is that? Yeah. So, you know, where you have high ambient levels of noise, maybe hearing something at 65 decibels is not so startling.
Maybe just
You know,
explain to people in ambient is background noise, Jamie. Yeah.
Correct. You know, whereas, you know, in rural areas where that ambient noise is very low, you know, the ability of even lower decibel sounds can do the same thing, you know, have these kind of awakening effects and so forth. So it was a way to kind of account for differences in geographic areas. And of course it complicates things, but it's probably a more meaningful metric.
No, I think that's right, and certainly in wind turbine noise, they're using the above the ambient noise, above the background noise levels as really very as one they regularly use. So I think it is meaningful, although as you say, it does complicate things a little bit. Right. Any more questions or any more comments? We're coming up to our hour. Yes, Lisa. Hi. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you, John. Thank you, Jamie, for the great presentation. I'd read your paper as well, so it was great to see it. Just very quick question. I haven't looked into this in detail myself, but I wondered if you had any comment, Jamie, on your results and findings, or just general comment in relation to the recent study that was published by the HMMH for the FAA regarding, I'm reading, it says, a survey of results related to non-acoustic factors and community noise. So very much talking, so they did a large survey and published the results recently. I haven't dug into it in detail, but I just wondered if you had any comment on how you view those results in relation to your own, or
like you, I have not dug into it either. But I'd love to get it and take a look and maybe talk about it at another meeting.
Yeah, John, are you aware of it?
I'm aware of it, but I haven't read it, Lisa. But
I can send a link.
Yes, send a link, and
we
will get that round because you know what you're saying about the non-acoustic factors, and I know you've Lisa's from the Noise Abatement Society in the UK, and I know you've done a lot of work on noise on the non-acoustic factors, and that would link in very nicely with you know, Jamie's surveys.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking many of the things that were mentioned, you know, fear and especially the concept of control, rage, anger, all of those things would fall into some of the categories that come up time and time again in relation to transportation noise sources, especially aviation and people's response to them. This came up a lot in the ANIMA work as well, the EU ANIMA study.
Yes, absolutely.
Talked about this a lot. So non-acoustic factors by any other name, but similar findings as you, Jamie, although not so wide scale on the community level. So it's great to see that work done.
Yeah, I know there's forgetting the researcher's name. I think it's Grusky published some work on a model that incorporated some of these non-acoustic factors
Right. Yeah.
into as determinants, looking to see how determining they were of adverse impacts.
That's right. Really, the noise stress concept, which is Dr. Munsell referred to that as well. It's one of the models that underlies how the annoyance response then translates into the psycho and biological effects. So
Exactly.
but yeah,
Yeah,
we're
thank you.
all meeting at the same place in the middle. But I just mentioned, and I'll send the link about the FAA report. I only mention it because apparently, and I'm just quoting from a generalist view of it, one researcher said that the results were non-conclusive, which I found surprising considering community strong views of how they are affected by aviation noise. And so just a final comment on that is it made me think, well, I wonder, yeah, well, I wonder how that analysis came down to being inconclusive because
Yeah.
communities do feel very strongly, as we know, about how they're
I
affected.
know.
So-
I know. And when you think of, when you think of the concept of validation, the fact that you have all the science, you have community experiences and physiological data, all these things tie together and paint a very consistent story. And yet there's a lot of excuses for not paying attention to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lisa. Elaine, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, no, I just wasn't sure what study she was referring to, and I don't know if she was referring to the recent survey that the FAA took on the 65 DNL. I don't know if there was any connection towards that because we haven't gotten any information from that study, that survey from the FAA. And I'm not surprised that the FAA has come up with the statement that it was inconclusive because it's the FAA. So, we have to be very careful when we're looking at what the FAA does as opposed to people that are outside researchers and especially what Jamie did with her survey, which we felt was very, very important. Community organizations throughout the United States felt it was very, very important. We had many discussions on that. So we were so grateful that she took up the charge of that, knowing that our voices weren't really represented throughout the country. And so it was a great survey to take. It showed a lot of information, a lot of what people were actually experiencing. So I think it's very important. And if you could do that in Europe, that would be great. But it does, if you have to organize your aviation groups and your aviation communities, your leaders or whoever's running that, because getting that information out to take that survey, our organizations did that. We put out that work. And so if you want to do that, you really do have to organize, your groups and, get a list, a base, and then start working from there. But I want to thank Jamie once again because, she started out quiet communities, with noise, just noise, neighborhood noise and expanded and grew and developed this great organization that encompasses all types of noise. And then she realized how aviation noise is one of the major factors that is impacting our environment. And she developed a team and a group of people who are dedicated to working on aviation noise. So Jamie, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for the work that you have done, including the aviation community. So we thank you.
Thanks, Elaine.
Thank you, Elaine.
That's a nice tribute. Just before I bring in Martin, Bob, I saw your question in the chat. I don't think, to my knowledge, there's been any court cases on this. Martin, on you go, and then Christian.
The survey inspires me that we could do as well a local survey. If it's one airport and the communities and people annoyed around one airport, like Heathrow or Frankfurt or Paris, you could do as well such a survey. You have to spread it in a different way to get the response from the people who are annoyed. But I think we could do as well a local survey. That is as well helpful for those who want to come in. So we keep it in mind, John, for our next meeting.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm going to come back to this because I think there's something positive coming out of here. Christian, you wanted to come in.
It was a very tenuous link to the what Bob was asking about. In about 1970 or 1971, my dad, who was then working at the National Physical Laboratory in Test and Measurement, was allowed to take some equipment home, living at Traveller's Way, just up the road from the airport. He actually gathered sufficient data to take Hounslow Council to court.
Just to explain to people, Christian, Hounslow Council is one of the councils very close to Heathrow Airport.
Correct, yes. He took Hounslow Council to court and won, and obtained actually a discount on his poll tax, his council tax at the time, as a result of it. So it made front page news, and I have that that newspaper somewhere. So I will find it and scan a copy for you and forward that on, John, so that you can circulate it.
Brilliant, Christian. Like father, like son, I think.
Yeah, very much so. Yes.
Okay. Any further points? I don't see any further hands.
I have just one thing.
Yes, sorry,
that I
Jamie.
think
Yes, on you go.
I think it would be very interesting. There's a paper, and the authors are, one of them is Tabor. It's published in the Journal of Ethics, which comes from the American Medical Association, and it's on sleep as a human right. And the interesting thing about it is that it says that sleep is recognized as a human right by both domestic courts and international courts. And it would be very interesting to dig into that, perhaps even to invite the authors. Noise is, but one of the things that can perturb sleep, obviously, but it's a huge problem in aviation. So those folks might be very good people to invite to this group.
Yeah, absolutely, Jamie. Absolutely. Okay, well, look, a huge amount has come out of tonight. It's been really productive. Lisa's put a whole number of links in the chat, which I'll pick up on. As I say, the webinar it's been recorded, so it'll be up on the UECNA website. But I think what's really come out of today is that, as Martin and others have said, other people can do similar surveys. Whether it's at a local airport level or whether it's at a regional level, a Europe-wide level. I think, Martin, you're right. UECNA can talk about, we'll talk about this. But before we do that, Sandra wants to come in, I think. Sandra, do you want to come in? No, you're waving. You're waving to your children. Okay, don't worry.
To colleague. No, I had a question, but I think it's already replied. I was because the study is really interesting, and I was wondering how did you advertise so people could reply to the survey, But I think Jamie actually end up explaining that was through the local communities, I think. So if you have anything to add related to that, I appreciate.
Yeah. No, not not really. It's, communities that we've been in touch with through our educational, our conference efforts and so forth. And then, organizations like Darlene, who we try and support, is connected to a lot, I think even more. So we had, we were able to feed into those citizens groups and have it distributed widely. But in terms of, I don't think we didn't get any questions back about the survey. There were a lot of open-ended comments, and there's so many of them. We have them kind of organized. They're sort of all over the map. I think it would take weeks to kind of really sort through them. But yeah, we focused mainly on the just the simpler results.
Brilliant. Well, as I say, I'm sure this is something could be replicated and will be replicated. If people are thinking of doing it at their own airports, feel free to drop me or drop UECNA an email, and we can perhaps work together on it. And I'm sure Jamie will be back in contact with you, asking difficult questions of about the methodology. But it really is, I think, quite inspiring, because it's something, as somebody said, that it's local community focused, and it can be done by local communities themselves, and still get a very revealing and legitimate finding, which takes the debate forward very nicely. And Christian, you feel free to drop me a line about low frequency noise, because when I was at HACAN, we did a survey as many years ago now about the difference between C weighting and A weighting of the noise of the planes, and I can dig that out for you. Right. We're almost at an end. We've been enjoying ourselves so much that we've run over time. Just to say, the next webinar will be sometime in July. Now, it's going to take a slightly different form. Some of you will remember that about 2 years ago, we did almost an open question and answer session. And it worked really rather well. And we thought this time we would repeat it with the topic of best operational practice, because some airports are quite good at operating. Just hang on a second. Sorry, that's my phone going off. Some airports are quite good at operating using the best techniques. Others are very poor. And so what we thought we would discuss amongst ourselves is learn from each other which airports are doing well. For example, who has continuous descent approach, who doesn't, and various other things as well. So that will be, I'll chair the session, and that will be sometime in July. But before I finish, David, you wanted to make a point.
Sorry, trying to figure out how to unmute. Yeah, I'm hoping that at some future session you'll invite Dame Ann Dowling, who is on your side of the pond, and much revered in England for her work on quieter aircraft, because those quieter aircraft are now just going into production on this side of the pond. There are several companies that are working on what she began work on back in the late 1980s. And she's a terrific spokesperson, and she's spoken on the idea of quieter aircraft quite widely. So she's well known on the subject. And she, in the late 90s, early 2000s, she was here at MIT on behalf of Cambridge University in a joint effort to investigate quiet aircraft. And they don't exist in production now because Boeing buried the program, basically. So it's not that they couldn't have been made, it's that the leading aircraft manufacturer over here simply buried it, put it on the shelf and didn't touch it. It went private recently, about 10 years ago, and the same people who were working with Dame Ann Dowling over here are the people running the company now, and they're very well funded with money from the Department of Defense over here, and also from NASA and other agencies. So they're very well funded privately as well as from federal agencies, moving forward on quiet aircraft, which is a very exciting, in my view. There's no other way out of this. We can complain all we want. We can do all the surveys we want, but until we can show the aviation industry a way out of this, nothing is going to happen.
David, thanks very much for that. And I've noted all the details down so we can take that forward. We're also hoping to do probably in the autumn a webinar on concentrated flight paths. We've touched on that before, but I think there's a lot of people wanting us to do it again, so we'll probably repeat that. You know, Elaine gave us a very good webinar, I think it was a couple of years ago on that, and we'll probably do more on it because I think there's new developments. Okay, well, look, as I say, I will. We'll get everything up on the web on our website as soon as possible, and it just leaves me to pass back finally to Elizabeth.
So thank you all for being here. I think it was a very interesting webinar. We'll learn a lot of things. We have some links which are very interesting, and we hope to see you at our next webinar on July, as John said. So thank you all and have a good evening. Elaine, can you stay a while? Martin sent something, so what he wanted.
Okay, yeah, fine.
Thanks very much. I've just stopped recording, so thank you.
So Elaine, did you
Yes.
see